She says it's still saying it's connecting on her end. Any idea?
We're refreshing it and see if that'll...
So we refreshed it, still not connecting?
We've closed it out and tried.
All right, so they sent a different link. Here it is. Try that one. We connected? Getting anything from WVNN? We're sending but not receiving anything?
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
The time has come for America to hear the truth.
We are going to stand with them, and not only are we going to fight for their rights, but we're going to stand up for our rights here in our state, in our homes, and in our community.
One day longer, one day stronger. One day longer, one day stronger.
Because the future of labor's rights in the United States of America is not going to be decided in the courts. It's not going to be decided in Congress. It's not going to be decided on talk radio, and it sure is not going to be decided on Fox News.
For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Our guest today is Carol Gundlach, a policy analyst from Alabama Arise, to talk about the expenditure of funds from the American Rescue Plan and their fight to end the grocery tax. We're talking about a clip from a recent city council meeting. We're defending Chicago teachers from a progressive, and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And you can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might play it on the show if it is particularly good or particularly bad. Either way works. If you hadn't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us online. We are on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. And just a reminder before we get started here today, your support keeps us on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining member of the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to unionly.io/o/TVLR. That is unionly.io/o/TVLR or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. And if you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. So, let's go ahead and get right to it since we had some technical difficulties. We'll jump right in. The first thing that we wanted to talk about, and I can't believe that we're still having to talk about this. It's insane because it's so clear to anybody. It seems to me it's so clear to anybody with like just a sense of like what is good and just. I can't. I mean, like this isn't even something like that conservatives and liberals or leftists or whatever. Like, I've heard people on like conservative talk radio hosts to local community activists all say, oh, wow, this is a really terrible thing that happened, and like this was a bad decision to make. But there are still people in the city government that are defending the route that our city took. And so what am I talking about? I'm talking about our one of our resident killer cops in Huntsville, Alabama. Apparently, the murder screen is broken at the Huntsville Police Department. I mean, my God. But last week, a city councilor defended their decision to pay for the defense of former Officer Darby, a murderer cop, in his defense trial. Now, for those that don't remember, and for those that aren't local, maybe, let's review really quickly what happened. In April of 2018, people called 911 to assist a suicidal man, Jeffrey Parker. 2 HPD officers arrive on the scene, and they are doing what should be done in these situations. That is, they got to the scene and they basically try to help this guy. They're talking to him. They're trying to de-escalate, not being threatening. They're just being like a normal person to this guy at the lowest point of his life. He has a flare gun to his head, and they and obviously they assess the situation. They're like, this is a suicidal guy. He's not trying to kill us. He's trying to kill himself. And what is our job as people who are supposed to protect our citizens? Our job is to make him not kill himself. That's what we should be doing in this situation right now. We should be trying to de-escalate the situation and make him pull his gun down. And the goal is that everybody leaves healthy and safe and alive, and maybe we can get this guy some help afterwards. Then Officer Darby shows up, and 11 seconds later, Jeffrey Parker is dead. He has been shot in the face by Darby's shotgun, despite never having made any threatening movements, gestures, or sounds. He's killed dead on the spot 11 seconds after the murderer cop, Officer Darby, shows up. 11 seconds. Officer Darby is then charged with murder by the Republican Madison County District Attorney, Rob Broussard. Okay, so at this point, any reasonable person should be thinking, oh, hey, the Republican District Attorney is charging a cop with murder? Man, maybe I should step back from my instinctive maybe I should step back from my instinctive need to defend cops, like to defer to authority, to the violence of the state. Maybe I should step back for a second and say, oh man, maybe this is like a unique situation.
Yeah, I think I have to really just jump in and emphasize that the district attorney, Rob Broussard, he is not just a Republican. He is a very pro-law enforcement, pro-police Republican. This is someone that, activists have had issues with in the past when it comes to other incidents of police violence.
Has he ever even once prosecuted a police brutality case? I mean, I don't know, but it would surprise me.
This is the only one that comes to my mind, and like I said, I know in previous incidents, he was by no means seeking transparency, he's not one of these reformer district attorneys that we've heard about, like in Philadelphia. That's not this guy.
Yeah. So if you're even if you're a conservative politician who I back the blue. I love the violence that the state inflicts on its citizens most of the time. That's totally great. Or if you're even a liberal back the bluer and you're maybe there are some bad apples, but broadly speaking, cops are good. Maybe at this point, we've got a Republican district attorney who's very pro-law enforcement. Just take a damn step back and assess the situation. So the police chief says that he's reviewed the body camera footage and he says that the officer is innocent. The police chief and the city council then votes to use taxpayer dollars to give an extravagant defense for the killer cop, ultimately about $150,000. Not having seen the footage, not having seen any evidence, they're deferring to the judgment of the chief of police. Okay? Darby is ultimately found guilty of murder. The body camera footage is released, and at least one city council member has expressed regret for the expenditure of those funds, but not Frances Akridge. She still defends her decision and even said, this is just fascinating. I mean, fascinating. Maybe at the time you could defend the, like, oh, the police chief, he should know what's going on. Maybe I'm going to trust the police chief more than this, super right-wing district attorney. Maybe at the time you can say that. But she says that knowing what she knows now, she would have made the same decision. So let's listen to her defense at a recent city council meeting. Adam, go ahead and play the clip.
I want to address the Darby defense. If it were to happen again, God forbid, and the police chief, who in his estimation thought that the officer followed their training, and the mayor also thought that, it is not up to this council to review body camera. It is not, because all of these things do have a direct correlation to Supreme Court decisions.
Okay, pause it there. Don't change the scene. Just pause it there, because I want to interject really quick. She's saying that she's trying to defend her decision by deferring to defend her decision of deferring to the police chief with Supreme Court decisions. The Supreme Court, I emailed her yesterday. I asked her about the Supreme Court decisions that she was referencing. She referenced Graham v. Connor, which is about how you find a cop guilty or not, basically. Not about whether or not city councils should defer to police chiefs when they ask for $100,000 for a super special defense for their super special boy. That's not what Graham v. Connor is about. It's about how you determine guilt, not whether police officers deserve an extra special defense that normal citizens do not get. Let's continue with the clip.
I would vote again today if any employee, even a trash truck driver, was accused of a crime and it was recommended that we spend 50 cents a head on tax from each taxpayer to get the best defense possible. I would do it again today. Because that's what we do for employees. Any organization has to stand by their employees.
All right. And there we go. That's the relevance. That's why it came to my attention, because what she's doing here is she's trying to defend the decision to give a super special defense for a super special boy as some sort of as a pro-worker stance. And let's remember really quick that the police chief and the mayor are still saying that he followed the policy. They're still saying he followed the policy, and they still believe this case was wrongly decided. McMurray and Battle are out there literally today defending a convicted murderer, defending his murder. And she would still defer to their judgment.
Yeah,
Now,
and I wanted to interject here because someone brought this up in the YouTube chat, and it's a fair question about what does this have to do with the subject matter of this show. This is a union show. We talk about labor issues, working class issues, and I'll just say my opinion, and you're welcome to interject however you want to, Jacob. But in my opinion, for one thing, there's the hypocrisy of this statement to couch this in the pro-worker language, as you mentioned. There's the disparity between the way Darby has been treated by city government versus how any other worker would.
Right.
And I know she I think responding to some criticism there, made it a point to bring up someone who drives a garbage truck.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
but, that's a very different scenario.
Right.
And you asked me off air about teachers.
Yeah.
If a public school teacher in Huntsville, Alabama, were to be accused of sexual assault, does the Huntsville City Schools or the city of Huntsville or state of Alabama pay for their criminal defense? And the answer is no.
Right.
So, this isn't like, hey, we have a basic liability protection for our employees when they are indicted for their duties on the job. This was, as you mentioned, above and beyond any sort of, ordinary protocol. So I think that is one of the reasons why it's a relevant topic. I think it's relevant that we know what's happening in our community. Anyway, we are based here in North Alabama.
Right.
And the final thing I'll just say on that, I'll get off my soapbox, is that we know that police violence disproportionately impacts working class people.
Right. Bosses aren't going to be, murdered.
Right.
by a
Jeff
cop.
Bezos is not concerned about police violence.
Right.
But our brothers and sisters who work in Amazon warehouses and work for these corporations, they do have to be concerned about it, particularly people who are racial minorities, people who are LGBT. Those aren't just things that are made up. That's statistical evidence. There's a clear disproportionality in the way the police treat people in this country and here in this community. Huntsville, Alabama, for example, I believe it's about 10 times, 12 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana if you're black versus white in the city limits of Huntsville.
Yeah.
These are very stark disparities, and it does all tie together because it's ways in which working class people are divided and ways in which we are, subjected to violence by the state, in this same state, which will turn around and defend those inflicting the violence as opposed to defending and supporting the workers in a community who actually grow the community upon whose labor the community rests.
Right. Yeah. And so, one of the things that the first thing that a union will bargain for, one of the first things in a new contract, or one of the first things that they'll make sure gets made better or is re-upped in a new contract negotiation is just cause disciplinary procedures. Okay?
Absolutely.
And we talk about that, and one of the things that we liken it to is due process in our judicial system. And I think that's very important. And I would never advocate that anybody, no matter how heinous their crime, not get a competent defense. Right. Everybody has a right to an attorney, and I believe, which Frances makes you think that she does. She makes you think that that she believes every employee should have a right to due process. And I don't know if she's just not aware of the reality that working people face, but most working people do not get due process on the job. Most working people, if you don't have a union contract, you are totally at the whim of your boss. And so, am I saying that there should not have been due process for the killer cop when he murdered somebody for his job? No, there should have been. And am I saying that there should be no due process for the killer cop when he murdered somebody as far as him going to jail or not? No, there should have been. And if Frances or anybody else has an issue with the level of defense that killer cops receive, then the solution is not to pay for, out of taxpayer dollars, a super special defense for a super special boy. The solution is to better fund our public defense so that everybody has a competent defense. Because cops aren't special. Cops are not a higher class of people. Cops are not better than me. Cops are not better than you. And they don't deserve better than you or me. So if the city council believes that the defense offered to normal working people, and this is why it's relevant to us as a show that advocates for the rights of working people through their collective action, if the city council believes that the defense that would be offered to normal working people, like a garbage truck driver or an Uber driver, is not adequate, then address that on a systemic level. Don't make a special exception for a killer cop. You know, like, let's start talking about maybe people should get due process for, like, robbery or assault or smoking weed. Maybe we should start talking about those people getting a competent defense before we start talking about people who murder somebody after they got there 11 seconds after they got somewhere. I mean, it's insane that you would still defer to the judgment of the police chief who believes to this day that the person followed protocol. And like, I don't care if they followed protocol. If they followed protocol and that was protocol, then the protocol is obviously against the law because it resulted in murder and they should change the protocol.
Right.
The answer is not that, he should get off scot-free because he changed the protocol. It means that the whole Huntsville Police Department is operating under a protocol that necessitates murder. And that's a problem. Okay, I mean, and we have and cops and office and military officers have a duty to disobey unlawful orders. So if the protocol does encourage murder, then the thing to do and the thing to encourage officers to do is to violate protocol. And it's so frustrating to me that wrapping this up in pro-worker language, because Jeffrey Parker was a worker. These people who good grief. Working people every day in this country face ramifications on their job and in the criminal justice system with much, much, much less due process than Parker got, or than Darby got, the killer cop. And so
because Mr. Parker received no due process.
Right.
I mean, I think that needs to be very clear, as with so many others who have been victimized by police violence. That is the absence of due process.
Right.
When an officer can be judge, jury, and executioner within 11 seconds. Yeah. And not to hammer this home too much, but it is pretty obscene to think that our city government and the police chief have remained in their positions,
right,
and have the nerve to tell us, we the people, that not only was the district attorney of their own ideology incorrect, but the justice system itself was wrong, that the jury of his peers was wrong.
Right.
It's very bizarre, honestly. I'm with you. I'm kind of surprised that they didn't just cut their losses at some point and say, you know what, maybe this is the bad apple. Because that's
that's always the defense, is that it's the bad apple.
Right. Okay.
But they defend every single bad apple.
Right. At some point, you can't really use that defense if you're going to go ham on fighting for the bad apples.
Yeah, I mean, and so, and we would not advocate that teachers who rape children get super special defenses in criminal court.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
They should be entitled to the same amount of due process and defense as anyone else. Yeah. And if they did, in fact, commit those crimes and they are convicted on those crimes, well,
then they should be punished for it.
They are an embarrassment to the profession.
Exactly.
And they are a shame to the profession. And any educator worth their salt would feel the same way.
Yeah.
And so that should be the response from the HPD Chief McMurray and from Mayor Tommy Battle. That should be their response of, you know what, the jury has spoken, justice has laid out what has happened here, and we're ashamed and we're sorry. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure nothing like this ever happens again.
Yeah.
How hard is it to even say this,
seriously,
knowing that you probably don't believe it and probably won't even do anything about it? But
seriously.
So that does take it to another level, and I think that's why it's fascinating, even when compared to these types of incidents in other cities and other states, because obviously this is a national problem. But Huntsville,
Yeah, and in another clip, she said something about like it's not the executive function to determine guilt, and all I'm doing is following somebody. And so okay, look, if you are principally opposed to, as the person who controls the purse strings, if you're principally opposed to looking at the evidence, then fine, like get somebody else to. Maybe get the HPCAC, the Huntsville Police Citizens Advisory Council, to review the evidence and make a recommendation to you if you don't want to for some reason. But like to defend still deferring to the police chief, who we know has, I mean, it's absurd. And Chad Chavez in our YouTube chat, which you can join if you find us on YouTube, The Valley Labor Report, you can get in there and you can chat with us. Chad Chavez says he also didn't like the way that Acreage said even a truck driver, as though their labor was worthless, which of course that's even, I mean, just classist and insane and it's crazy. So
yeah,
anyway.
And for those of you who somehow missed this, especially those of you who are not local, go back and check out the episode where we actually interviewed Chad, who is one of the community activists here in Huntsville, who's been trying to hold the system accountable. We had a great interview there. Me and David talked with him, and we offered quite a bit of coverage around those events. But check that out if you're curious, if you want to kind of go deeper with it. But yeah, it is a shame that we're still talking about it. It's certainly a shame to try to you really shroud the actions of City of Huntsville leadership in some sort of pro-worker language around this.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
There are plenty of ways that they can demonstrate they are pro-worker.
Right.
This has nothing to do with it. But hey, if that's their new change of heart, if now moving forward suddenly
every single
there's
worker
pro-worker sentiment on the Huntsville City Council, then hey, just prove it to us.
Yeah, prove
Show
it to us. Like I'll make we'll talk about Frances Acreage in a much more positive light if she let's say pushes forward an ordinance in Huntsville City that eradicates at-will employment for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
like
look
that
forward
would
to
be
seeing all city employees have collective bargaining agreements.
Right.
Moving forward.
And I look forward to her eliminating at-will employment within the city limits of Huntsville, because that's something that can be done.
Right, yeah.
New York City did that. They eliminated at-will employment for fast food employees. So if she really thinks that everybody is entitled to due process, then effing prove it. Prove that you think that people like the lowly garbage truck driver in your mind, or the lowly burger flipper. Like if you think they deserve due process, then effing prove it. Anyway, okay, so we're going to talk about the next thing that we're going to talk about is like a progressive, quote unquote, who has, I don't know, he's been like really weird, but he went on the attack against the teachers unions, which is very progressive. So
this is always before we
it.
even get into this, I just got to say that it's always very illuminating when people who claim to be progressive or pro-labor start to issue their hot takes about unions.
Yeah, it's great.
Because a lot of times you can expose how they really feel.
Yeah. So let's go to a break really quick, and we will be right back defending Chicago teachers. Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report. YouTube says there's an echo.
Work sucks, we know, but you can make it better by organizing with your fellow workers. For more information, call or text the Huntsville Industrial Workers of the World at 256-651-6707.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBEW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBEW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBEW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
IBEW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBEW is the right choice.
It kind of it was incredibly frustrating to me. And so the folks that listen to us online, you're going to know who this guy is. Folks that listen to us on the radio, you're not going to know who this guy is. But it's okay because he says a lot of things that a lot of people say. So we can, even though you don't know who it is, we'll be able to attack. We'll be able to attack the ideas, and you'll get the gist. Okay. So Jimmy Dore is an internet politics guy. And so let's just jump right into it. I don't think that Adam has heard it, so we'll be able to kind of get his live takes. Let's go ahead and play that clip really quick.
Sure, and as I'm queuing that up, I do want to mention I greatly apologize, Jacob. I think you were muted for the first few seconds back. So, as always, technical problems can be blamed on me, Adam. Complaints about such technical problems can be forwarded to you, Jacob. So anyone who has complaints, share them with Jacob. He'd love to hear them.
I do.
But it is my fault. I will gladly take the blame for that. So, without further ado, let's listen to this moron, Jimmy Dore.
There's a big debate about whether they should open the schools because of COVID and because Omicron is so much more contagious. Omicron, the symptoms of Omicron are very mild, and they're like a cold. And a lot of people are saying that's good because that signals the end of the pandemic, because now we're going to become endemic, and now it will just circulate, and the symptoms that it will present with are those of a cold. Even though it's not, it's the Omicron cold.
Okay,
so
let's pause it right there. Don't change the scene. I'm
pants.
just going to address this really quick. He says that he calls it an Omicron cold, and he mentions that people are getting happy about this because it's more mild. It might signal the end of the pandemic. It might become endemic, and that's true enough, right? And we spoke to Dr. Mark-Elaine Derry about the coronavirus, about the pandemic, a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. It was like New Year's or something when we spoke to him. You can hear our conversation there, full conversation with him on YouTube, our podcast as well. And he said a similar thing. Yes, the Omicron variant is more mild, and hopefully, crossing our fingers here, this will signal a trend in the coronavirus to become more and more mild. Because generally speaking, when we have a virus or when we have a cold, he says, it will become more and more mild because the goal of an organism is to live, right? And so if you're too virulent, if you're too deadly, you're going to kill your host. You're not going to be able to spread as much. You're not going to be able to live as long. You're not going to be able to replicate. And so, like, it's generally the path is that it becomes more mild. And so, but we haven't seen that so far with the coronavirus. We've actually seen with each variant, it has become more and more transmissible and more virulent, more and more deadly, which is scary. It's very scary. But Omicron is the first variant that has become more transmissible, yes, but less virulent, less deadly. So the hope is, it's just a hope at this point, a hope based in like what usually happens, but it's a hope that it will continue to become less virulent, and that it will signal an end to the pandemic. It will signal that this will become endemic, and it will cycle through the population like the 1918 Spanish flu, because anytime you get a flu, you actually still get a variant of the Spanish flu because it got less and less virulent, less and less deadly, okay? But we're not there yet.
Yeah, there's some promising signs out of Africa and other places where Omicron, hit first, and that's good.
Right.
But there's still a lot up in the air, and there's still, of course, the risk
it's not
that there's more variants that are worse.
It's not a cold yet, okay? Like maybe, hopefully it will, but the Omicron variant is not a cold, okay? So let's talk about the cold. Let's talk about the flu. The record flu season in the last 10 years, and I only know 10 years because I just checked 10 years. I thought 10 years was a good time to check, okay? I don't know, like, whatever. But the last 10 years, the record flu season was 2017 to 2018. There were 61,000 deaths over 19 weeks. That averages to a daily death count of 460-ish. Where are we right now? Yesterday, the 7-day average was 1,912 people dying per day. That's the 7-day average. For the entirety of the pandemic, that's 4 times more than the record flu season of the last 10 years. And in fact, over the entirety of the pandemic, from April 2020 until now, there have only been 8 weeks where the daily death count was less than the record flu season from the last decade. That means every week for the last year and a half, we have had more people dying per day than during than the death rate from the most deadly flu in the last 10 years. And that flu season was only 19 weeks, which was a long flu season. We're talking about 80 weeks where we're seeing death rates exceed that. Okay, so look, Omicron, potentially a good signal. Is it the flu yet? Is it the cold yet? No.
And there's the long-term health effects, and a couple people in the chat have brought that up, and I'm glad they did, because that's also a distinction there. Not only is comparing it to the flu, a pretty flimsy comparison, but the long-term effects of which we aren't entirely sure about right now. That's also a major difference there.
Yeah. So let's continue.
Cron cold. So everybody in their pants about kids having to go to school are just repeating propaganda from big pharma-funded establishment news. Congratulations. Do you know the damage
all right,
that's done to...
That's basically all that I wanted to listen to, because here he's talking about they're fear-mongered by the establishment. Like, who is he talking about? The establishment. The establishment is not on the side of teachers. The establishment is not on the side of the Chicago Teachers Union. I mean, he's taking the side of such anti-establishment figures as Joe Biden, Jen Psaki, Lori Lightfoot, Ben Shapiro. Yeah, this is a really rowdy, progressive crowd that we've got. Anti-establishment crowd. These people hate the establishment. These people hate capitalism. These people hate the status quo. They love it when people upend it. And totally, that's the crowd that he's hanging out with now. And this is all brought about. All these people, Morning Joe, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're all attacking the teachers right now, the Chicago Teachers Union. The ire of the entire United States is being put on the Chicago Teachers Union. And for what exactly? Let's review. Again, we spoke to Kenzo Shibata about this. You can go and hear the full conversation if you'd like. Let's review what is actually happening in the real world across the United States and in Chicago. The Chicago Teachers Union democratically voted. This was not a top-down dictate from the leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union. This was a democratic vote by the rank-and-file teachers to opt to go remote during the largest caseload of the coronavirus that we've seen to date. We are either approaching record hospitalizations or we're near or we've already passed record hospitalizations. They opted to go remote for the first time this year, I think, for the first time the whole school year, until some new safety measures were put in place. That's not crazy. And what were the safety measures? Maybe you think, I bet the safety measure was something like building new school buildings. No. Here were the safety measures they wanted. They wanted enforceable metrics to shift school to remote. Okay, we've invested with the American Rescue Plan. We have invested funds to allow schools to go remote temporarily. We should make use of those, especially while we are still hopefully coming to the end of the pandemic, but we're still in the pandemic. We can shift to remote when we have surges like this for a couple of weeks. We should have enforceable metrics to shift school to remote, okay? Doesn't lay out what the metrics should be, just says we need enforceable metrics. That sounds reasonable. Real contact tracing, that sounds reasonable. We should be told when we've been exposed, okay? That's not going to take a whole lot of money. And better vaccine access. Well, vaccines are free, so we just have to set the vaccines up and allow and say that schools should be vaccine sites. We should have vaccination on school grounds. It's not crazy. High quality masks for both students and staff. Here's the crazy thing. Chicago Public Schools was rejecting help from the state that was meant to keep their children safe, rejecting funding from the state to purchase masks, to purchase N95 and KN95 masks. So just stop, just accept money, okay? That's not crazy. Accept money. Like, let people give you money. Okay, that doesn't seem difficult. And have either temporary remote learning or proper testing. And here it's important to know that the mayor's daughter in her fancy-ass private school was remote learning during this whole time because of the coronavirus wave and implement a proper testing regime. That's like, this is not crazy stuff. That's what they asked for, and they were able to come to an agreement with Chicago Public Schools, and they're back in person now. Okay, so they did, and they opted to, and here's the crazy thing, they opted to go to remote learning, and what did the Chicago Public Schools do? They just canceled school. Like, all these people attacking the teachers for saying we want to teach safely for a moment while we get our bearings after the holiday. We want to take some time to get our bearings, teach remotely for a couple of weeks, or maybe for a week, or maybe for a few days while we implement some new safety measures. And everybody's attacking the teachers. Nobody is attacking the public school system, which just canceled school, but as just pitching a fit. I mean, even if you want to say that the teachers were totally in the wrong to do this, I don't think they were. I think it's a reasonable thing that they asked for, and it's a reasonable thing that they did. But even if you say that, Chicago Public Schools was doubly in the wrong. Because if you're actually concerned about teachers educating students, if you're actually concerned about students getting that education, you would want them to get some form of education rather than nothing. That's what they got during that week.
The school system locked out the teachers from their virtual learning courses and platforms because the mayor and what they called their school CEO, which is essentially their superintendent, but I think the name says it all, really. Yeah. The CEO and the mayor decided, well, this is an illegal strike you guys are doing. This is an illegal work action, which... Right. We'll see what side the law comes on that, but that's really irrelevant to the matter. Because they were all pissy about it, they decided, well, we'll show you. You want to do remote learning? Well, we'll just shut it off. So where you physically cannot get in on your computer to deliver remote instruction.
Yeah, we care so much.
That good for the kids.
We care so much about our students learning that we're just going to not allow them to learn at all for a week. Yeah, that's totally, you care so much about their education. Give me a break. Give me a break. And this is a guy who's supposed to be, like I said, he postures as like, oh, I'm the real progressive. I'm the guy who's actually for progressive values. I'm the guy who's actually for workers. And here he's going out of his way to deflect blame from the boss. Why were these things not implemented already? These are things that the Chicago Teachers Union has been asking for basically since the pandemic began. If Chicago Public Schools didn't want to have to go through this ad hoc stuff, they could have just said we're going to do this at the beginning so that you don't have a reason to take these ad hoc work actions. Everybody knows what's going to happen. But they didn't. He's going out of his way to deflect blame from the boss, from politicians. Who's the politician here? It's Lori Lightfoot. It's not the teachers. Going out of his way to deflect blame from politicians, from the government, from the establishment onto rank and file working people. And saying that he's anti-establishment and saying that he's progressive and that he's pro-worker. Give me a break.
But like I said earlier, I mean, that's what you see a lot of times in the kind of liberal commentary sphere.
Right.
When push comes to shove, and union issues are actually on the table and in the popular consciousness, often you get to see their real values. And those who crap on teachers and teachers' unions, that's really an indication of where their values lie. As the old song goes, whose side are you on?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't be pro-union if you're anti-teachers union. So let's go ahead. We're going to do one more segment before we talk to Carol. Carol Gundlach is going to be our guest today. She's from Alabama Arise. We're going to be talking about the American Rescue Plan and the expenditure of those funds in the state, which my first question to her is going to be like, what do you mean, the American Rescue Plan? Wasn't that like a year ago? We haven't decided what's going to happen with those, and apparently we haven't, so we're going to talk about that. But first, let's go to Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment where every week we talk about what happened in the last week in the labor movement in the South of the United States. We pull this information from whogetsthebird.substack.com with the permission of the author, Jonah Furman. He is a staff writer and reporter and organizer at Labor Notes, which is very good. And he does a newsletter every week where he compiles what happened in the last week in the U.S. labor movement all across the United States. We pull what happened in the South. If you want to see what happened in the rest of the United States, which there's a lot that happens. There's a lot that happens every week that we don't talk about because we want you to go and subscribe to the newsletter. It's very good. But we just talk about what happened in the South. So go subscribe to the newsletter. It's really good. I recommend it. Let's go ahead and talk about what happened last week in Southern labor. First, in organizing, we had 38 drivers for Ryder Logistics in Southwest Ranches, Florida. They are organizing with Teamsters Local 769. There are 7 more workers at the Atlanta Gaslight Company. They're organizing with the IBEW, which is another small group of workers organized at the utility this summer. 10 mechanics and technicians for WAI Construction in Huntsville, Alabama, voted 8-1 to join the Operating Engineers Local 320. I'm going to have to send a congratulations to those folks over there. It is the first non-security guard NLRB win in Alabama since 2019. Wow.
See, we had some good news today.
150 armed and unarmed transportation officers for MVM in McAllen, Texas, are unionizing with SPFPA. The staff of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, unionized with IBEW Local 500 by 67% in a card check election. Very cool. The Alphabet Workers Union, CWA, has apparently filed its first NLRB representation petition, which is very cool. It's not on the site yet, but the NLRB lags a few days. For 11 employees at a Google Fiber retail store in Kansas City, Missouri. So far, the wall-to-wall union, the wall-to-wall Google union, has focused on organizing tools outside of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board process, but this could mark a shift in strategy or just a variety of tactics being used, which I'm an advocate for. A new Amazon election date was set, but the union is signaling concerns. In a statement, they said, quote, "We are deeply concerned that the decision fails to adequately prevent Amazon from continuing its objectionable behavior in a new election. We proposed to the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, a number of remedies that could have made the process fairer to workers, which were not taken up in the notice of election issued today. Workers' voices can and must be heard fairly, unencumbered by Amazon's limitless power to control what must be a fair and free election, and we will continue to hold them accountable for their actions." So that is concerning, but there is And in the broader, to kind of more broadly contextualize, the win rate for rerun elections is only 40% compared to 67% for first union elections. And the win rate decreases as you get a larger and larger bargaining unit. And the bargaining unit at the Amazon facility in Bessemer is something like 6,000. So the
it's
odds,
an uphill battle.
It's an uphill battle.
Is what you're saying.
Definitely.
And I wanted to make sure we clearly stated this was the Bessemer, Alabama Amazon warehouse, and the union here is RWDSU,
the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union.
Right. So I want to make sure everybody was following us on that.
Yep. And but there is some cause for hope. I talked to the lead organizer of the campaign, and he said that the support that they've seen from the labor movement has been fantastic. And in fact, my union, this was news to me, and it was so cool to hear that. We talked to Reverend Everett Kelly, the national president of the American Federation of Government Employees last week, and he mentioned something about supporting the campaign. And so I talked to the organizer, the lead organizer on the campaign about that, and he said that AFGE had sent or is sending for 1 month 6 staffers to support the campaign, which is like, that's so cool. You're going to get 6 staffers, 6 organizers from AFGE to support this RWDSU campaign. The Teamsters are doing similar things. SEIU is doing similar things. The UAW is doing similar things. This is just fantastic. But like SEIU or like the Teamsters, you could say that, they've got like a vested interest there because, they're going to want to organize the Amazon drivers, of course. And that's true. But AFGE has no like direct interest in Amazon workers organizing because we're a federal employee union. We represent federal employees. It doesn't help us directly, of course. It helps us indirectly is the point. But it doesn't directly help us if Amazon workers unionize. But as part of the labor movement, as working people, an injury to one is an injury to all, and a victory for one is a victory for all. And so I'm so proud, so proud of my union for this this real and genuine material support for the campaign. And I'm so proud of other unions in the labor movement doing that. And it's exciting. It's an uphill battle, but hopefully they'll be able to climb it.
Absolutely. And this display of solidarity, that's what it's all about. And, on this show, we are obviously pro-union, but we at times, we offer our critiques of the unions as institutions. But this right here, this is why you pay your dues to your national and international. Sometimes, you can start to wonder, like, where does this money go? Why can't the local, keep all of this? Well, this is a good demonstration of why your dues dollars can be important, because it can allow your national and international unions to do shared staffing, to send in resources and staffers and support to other campaigns. And so next time, next year, next campaign, when it's you on the line, you and your brothers and sisters, hopefully they can return the favor. So that's what it's all about, and that is good news.
In strikes and bargaining, the UMWA strikers at Warrior Met in Brookwood, Alabama have enjoyed no breakthrough, unfortunately. Kim Kelly wrote for The Nation about why the miners won't quit after 10 months out of work. We are now past 288 days on strike, the longest strike in Alabama history. The longest strike in Alabama history. The Special Metals strike by 440 members of the Steelworkers Local 40 in Huntington, West Virginia, just passed its 100th day, with the company now planning to permanently eliminate 75 jobs. That's crazy.
I did see where Senator Bernie Sanders has come out in support of those steelworkers and has been trying to raise money for them, I believe, in their strike fund. And
he talked to them in a live stream with workers from the BCTGM John Denaire strike in Los Angeles and miners from the UMWA in Alabama.
I saw some familiar faces, some of our friends of the show interviewed there, and just saw a little headline that Senator Sanders, along with Elizabeth Warren and Tammy Baldwin, have come out to put more pressure on the investors that own Warrior Met Coal to settle this strike and resolve it in favor of the workers. And while I think you and I are on the same page, we are not that big a fan of electoral politics and probably don't follow it as closely as we used to. That's what you want to see out of an elected official. If you want to be pro-worker, to tie it back to our city councilor from earlier, that's the way you can be pro-worker. Raise money for strike funds. Use your influence and position to pressure these just hedge fund vampires in Wall Street to settle these strikes.
The steelworkers have tabled a new proposal to Exxon to end the 8-month lockout in Beaumont, Texas. The proposal also covers workers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who are not locked out, but the company rejected it. Meanwhile, ballots on a decertification vote are still impounded, and there's concern that the company doesn't, that they may just want to wait and see how that goes, how the decertification vote among the scabs goes before entertaining any deals. Very important context here is that the Steelworkers Pattern Agreement, covering 30,000 workers at 20 refineries across 12 employers, expires on February the 1st. Marathon is the lead negotiating target, but obviously what happens there will affect Exxon as part of the pattern. Educators in Orange County, Florida, are at an impasse with the district over pay as teachers leave the profession in droves, despite people saying that this has been 2 years of a paid vacation. I mean, give me an effing break. Despite teachers leaving in droves while COVID rages in a state with one of the lowest average teacher salaries in the country. The lowest average salaries for teachers in the country. The district is offering a $3,500 to $6,500 supplement, mostly in one-time bonuses, and the union says it isn't enough, which is obvious, and which likely, objectively, isn't going to address staffing issues, let alone fairness issues. Obviously. The president of the ATU Local 1395, representing transit workers in Escambia County, Florida, has his transit job back after an arbitrator ruled his April 2020 firing 2 years ago. He was fired 2 years ago. An arbitrator ruled that it was unjustified. The reason he was fired is that he let a camera crew onto company property to highlight the COVID safety issues in the early days of the pandemic. An arbitrator ruled that firing was unjustified. The headline is that the process works, quote unquote, but that is gobsmacking. 2 years out of a job for an unjust firing, only to be reinstated by an independent arbitrator, does not sound like a good process or a process working, but it's still more of a process, to tie it back again, it's still more of a process than any worker without a union contract has. No non-union worker will have an arbitrator rule in their favor on an unjust firing because no non-union worker is going to have the opportunity to take his case to an arbitrator. American Airlines and the Allied Pilots Association are seeking to bargain a new contract in a super compressed lightning round of negotiations meeting 5 days a week for 4 weeks starting on January 17th. While remote work for teachers gets all the attention, AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees, has filed a complaint against the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, not with but against the EEOC, as the EEOC is the employer, for refusing to bargain over telework provisions. This has been a rolling fight across several federal employers. And fortunately for us here in Huntsville, our commanders have been extremely reasonable in negotiations about telework because they're not being needlessly obstinate because they saw that we were able to work at home. And so, largely speaking, federal employees, if you're able to do your job at home in Huntsville, you have been given that option, which is good.
That's definitely good news, and it just seems like some common sense.
Right.
It is
and some people...
It's interesting that the EEOC, which is especially those of you who don't have unions, that would be, your main federal agency you could go to bring forth a complaint or try to address discrimination. And yet here they are, the subject of their own union complaint because of the way they are treating their own employees. If anyone ought to know better, it ought to be them. But, that's a common theme on the show with both agencies and institutions.
Yeah. Legislation in Florida seeks to end dues deduction, where the employer automatically deducts union dues from your paycheck and sends it to the union as agreed to in the union contract for most public employees. But notably, of course, not cops, firefighters, or prison workers, because cops are super special boys.
Way to just make it obvious that it is a very ideological thing. I've seen politicians talk before, like, oh, we shouldn't use the government resources for this, and it literally is just, the union sends them a file. They upload it. It's a very I'm sure it varies by union and payroll process, but it's not a very involved process. It's the employee's money that's being deducted. So but to carve out these exceptions makes it very obvious what they're trying to do.
Yeah, cops are super special boys. We don't want you to get your feelings hurt. If you have a gun, we love you so much. You're very special. You get your dues deducted, but nobody else, because you're special. The bill would also decertify public unions that fall below 50% membership among the represented unit, which would, of course, be more likely in the event that unions have to independently collect dues for each would-be member. And, again, this is just like an extra step to make it more difficult for workers to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely, because if you're in a private industry union, of course, that's one of the things you can negotiate is dues deduction in your contract. But the state of Florida is trying to take that option away from many of their workers.
But not cops, because they're special. We can't forget the special snowflakes.
Carol is on the line.
All right.
So we can...
we've got one more... that was it. So Carol's on the line.
Let's let Carol in the room, and love to hear some updates about the Alabama legislature.
Good deal. Yeah. So Carol Gundlach, we're gonna be talking over the next couple of weeks about the legislative session as it is now in session. It started on Tuesday, and so for our first interview about this, and maybe we'll bring her on after we get off the air. We'll keep going with her. If she has some time, potentially. But she's a policy analyst for Alabama Arise, and she's our next guest. So Carol, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to do it.
Great. So first, I want to ask, the American Rescue Plan was passed some time ago, nearing a year, and I guess my expectation was that maybe the funds had not been expended yet, but that they had been obligated already, as in there have already been decisions made about where the money would be spent. But apparently that's not the case. Is that right?
It is kind of the case. The legislature last session, appropriated some money from the American Rescue Plan. Initially, they appropriated $400 million to build new prisons in the state. And of course, that's a very controversial decision. A lot of people are not happy about it. The leadership of the legislature and the governor felt it was needed. But that took up about $400 million of the $1 billion we had received so far from the federal government. Now there's another $1 billion coming in about 6 months. And then the legislature also appropriated $80 million to help out hospitals and nursing homes that were really struggling during the COVID outbreak. So that was $480 million that has been spent out of a little bit over $1 billion. There's about $580 million left that we expect the legislature to appropriate sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Interesting. So why is it that why is it that 500 some odd million was not appropriated before?
I think it wasn't appropriated before because they were not in agreement about where it needed to go. We have several years to spend this money, and there was a real desire, I think, to spend it wisely and well in what was really going to be investments for the state, not to spend it in a hurry. The other thing is just last week, maybe the week before, the United States Department of the Treasury issued their final rules on what that money could be spent on. And, there was already questions about whether or not we could spend it on prisons. I think they didn't want to obligate $1 billion without being sure that it was being spent where the federal government would allow it to be spent.
Yeah, well, so you said that there was just a ruling on the restrictions, and apparently the restrictions don't include building prisons, so they must be pretty lax. What are the restrictions? Like, what are some of the broad overview of like what can the money be spent on and what can't it be spent on?
It can be spent on anything that would consider to be infrastructure. Some percentage of it can be spent to replace lost state revenue during the recession, and the formula for determining whether or not state revenue has been lost is, I guess I would say, it's a non-intuitive formula. And that is where they were able to spend the money on prisons because that was less than the revenue that the state lost under this formula. It cannot be spent on Medicaid, and it cannot be spent on retiring debt or on replacing money that is given away in a tax cut.
Interesting. So it cannot be used to expand Medicaid?
It cannot. We very much would have wanted it to be used that way. Now, well, Medicaid expansion is a whole nother issue, but we could argue that you could spend the money on other costs of state government, thereby freeing up money that could be used to expand Medicaid.
Interesting. So have you been able to, as somebody who's following this issue, have you been able to get a sense of what some of the likely expenditures of the American Rescue Plan dollars are? As in, what is the Republican majority looking most closely at using these dollars for?
Yes, we did get some kind of a preview late last week, yesterday or the day before. We think that they are looking at broadband expansion, particularly in rural areas. We all know, and I live in a very rural area, and so I'm extremely aware of the broadband needs in our rural counties. So it can be spent for that. They can spend it to replace revenue that has been lost through the unemployment compensation system, to rebuild that trust fund. Now, we would probably argue that that is not the best expenditure of the money, but I believe that the legislature is going to do that. I think they're going to probably try to spend some more of it on helping rural hospitals, which have really been struggling, and we've been losing rural hospitals. And so I think they are going to put some of it into health care. It can be spent on kind of mitigating the impact of COVID. And I expect to see an appropriation to our Department of Public Health for that purpose. That's a good thing to do because the Department of Public Health has been chronically underfunded, and they really need some more resources.
Right. And that the public broadband or investment in broadband, rural broadband sounds really good to me. It's crazy how bad the internet is in rural parts of the state. I live 40 minutes outside of the largest city in the state of Alabama, and my internet is terrible. it's awful. Like, and I have the best, most premium package that you can get. I pay more for terrible internet 35 minutes away from the city than I paid for Google Fiber when I lived downtown. I mean, it's crazy. And so I can't imagine like actually living in one of the super, super rural areas, like on top of the mountains or like a skyline or something like that. Internet up there is just, I've been up there. It's even worse. I can't imagine having to deal with that in today's society. Have you got some time after we go off the radio to talk to us some more for another 15 minutes or so?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so we've got about 4 more minutes here on the radio then, and so that you're able to hit this with our radio audience, there's a push to end the grocery tax. Can you explain to us the grocery tax and like why it's unique that we have that?
And Alabama is one of only 4 states in the nation that fully taxes groceries, which means that in most of the state, people are paying an additional 10 or 11% for their groceries in taxes. And like I said, the vast majority of states do not tax groceries. And we have been trying to end the grocery tax for years. There is a bill pending now at the legislature that Senator Andrew Jones has introduced that would eliminate the grocery tax. The catch has never been ending the grocery tax. It's been replacing the revenue. Because once we end the grocery tax, we pull about $400 million, maybe closer to $500 million now, out of the education budget. And we don't want to do that. The legislature doesn't want to do that. Clearly, educators don't want to do that. So we have to replace that revenue. Alabama Rises had a proposal to replace the revenue in a way that would not hurt ordinary working people, but it would ask the rich to pay additional taxes in order to give everybody a break on the grocery taxes. That hasn't passed. Senator Jones has a bill that would do exactly that, and we're really, really hoping it passes this year.
Have you been able to get a feel? What is it specifically? You said that the tax is gonna the burden is gonna fall on the wealthier people. What is is it like a income tax on the top whatever, or is it a property tax, or what is it?
It is effectively an income tax increase for the richest. Alabama is also one of very few states that allows people to deduct their federal income taxes from their income before they calculate their state income tax. It's called the federal income tax deduction, or we call it the FIT. And of course, because the federal income tax is progressive, the rich pay more in federal income taxes than do people who are, working for a living and don't have a lot of money. So they get the benefit of the federal income tax deduction. We have proposed getting rid of the FIT completely, which would increase taxes on the very top 1%, really on people who are millionaires or close there too, in order to take the sales tax off groceries. Senator Jones' bill would cap the amount of money people can deduct when they calculate their state income taxes to, I believe it's $4,000 per person. So it's kind of a compromise, and we hope it'll be more palatable.
And what's been the reception to this idea among the Republican majority?
Well, we don't know yet because the bill was just introduced a couple of days ago, and as we know, they're getting ready to go into a special session. So we will see what the reaction will be. We hope this is a moderate approach. We're running some numbers now to see how much it will cost and who it will cost. And so we should know more in a week or so.
Gotcha. All right. So, folks, if you're listening on the radio, you can continue listening online. We are online at the Valley Labor Report on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to continue talking to Carol Gundlach, policy analyst from Alabama Arise, about the grocery tax and American Rescue Plan Fund expenditures and what the likelihood is of these things passing. We're also going to be talking in the next couple of weeks about a new bill that is going to limit the freedom of assembly and freedom to protest in Alabama. Going to continue talking about that and how that's going to affect striking workers like our brothers and sisters down in Brookwood on strike against Warrior Met. So this has been the Valley Labor Report. We will see you next week. All right. So everybody else is still with me. Thank you. Thank you to everybody on YouTube and Facebook for hanging on the line. I appreciate your willingness. I jumped this on Carol because I wanted to talk some more. I jumped it on her. Like I didn't ask her if she'd have time. So I appreciate her willingness to stay on the line with us. So yeah, you were saying that you're not totally sure about the reception among the Republican majority to the idea of this tax deduction being taken away. Have there been any other proposals? About ways to make up the difference?
Oh my, yes, there have been over the years, almost all of which Arise has not supported. There was
very
a proposal. Yeah, I know. There was a proposal a couple of years ago to basically increase the sales tax on everything else. So instead of paying sales tax on groceries, you'd pay them on your kids' tennis shoes. We didn't think that was reasonable. That was also going to be a burden on the people who could least afford to pay. And we really felt that we don't need any more regressive taxes in the state. We need progressive taxes where ability to pay determines how much you do pay. There have also been proposals to simply take the sales tax off groceries. And I should say all along, we're talking about the state portion of the sales tax, which is about 4% of cost. We are not talking the counties and the city's portion of the sales tax, simply because we can't bankrupt local government. Because Alabama doesn't have home rule for localities, we don't want to shut down our county commissions or our city governments by taking away a tax revenue that they do have. So we're talking about
but would it even be in the? I thought that localities set their own locality sales tax. Do they? I mean, like, would it even be something that the state legislature could do to take away the local sales tax?
Yeah, they could do it. And they could do it. Actually, Senator Jones' bill is a constitutional amendment, which certainly would trump any local authority. So yeah, we could prohibit the localities from collecting sales tax on groceries and allow them to raise sales tax on other things. Again, we don't think that that's particularly helpful to people. There have been proposals to simply take the sales tax off groceries and let the education budget take the hit. And we, again, have thought that our schools are struggling so much, and particularly right now, our schools are struggling, that pulling $500 million out of their budgets just, is not a solution.
Right.
I wanted to jump in here because if for those of you listening or watching, if you haven't seen this plan that Alabama Arise has put out that Carol mentioned, I really encourage you to check it out. Arise, their team has done a great job putting together some graphics and showing you exactly who would pay more taxes and who would pay less. And I distinctly remember, getting the flyer in the mail and seeing it all laid out visually that the vast majority of us in Alabama would actually pay a little less in taxes because, again, it's being able to write off your federal income taxes is really just helping the top. And for most of us, that deduction is not going to trump what we're paying in grocery taxes, every day, every week, every time we're going out and buying food for our family. So, and I get that the current legislation being discussed by Senator Jones is a little different than that. It's a little bit of a compromise measure, but it's really a common sense plan.
Right.
It's a way to where you could not only replace that revenue and make sure the schools are made whole in this adjustment, but actually have additional revenue for the state to be able to use on something like expanding Medicaid or other, good, legitimate funding purposes that we've discussed here today. So, again, I just want to encourage folks to check that out. It's not at all a radical proposal. It's a very common sense proposal that for most of us would mean slightly less paid taxes every year, but would mean, an extra help for those of us on the lowest end of the income spectrum, much less of a hit every time you go to Walmart, Kroger, Publix. Meanwhile, you're talking about a very modest increase for those who can certainly most afford it. I'm just going to editorialize here a sec. I'm disappointed that I don't see more from the education community to come out loud in support of a proposal like this. Because as a former educator myself, I know how important it is that the families we're serving in our public schools be able to afford a decent life. This is one way to provide some direct material help to the lowest income families so that they can make sure their cupboards and fridges are stocked, so they have more money to spend on clothes, other bills that they have, whatever they may need to do to have a decent quality of life. So this is a way we can impact the quality of life of the families being served by public schools. And it's a way to ensure that this issue is resolved, it's off the table, and it's a way to ensure that the Education Trust Fund benefits while the rest of the state also benefits. And I think in Alabama, the education community has been very shy about speaking on broader issues of the political economy and really connecting the dots between the poverty and other quality of life issues we suffer here in the state and the academic performance. Because the state of Alabama and its leadership love to, do these report cards and failing school lists and other ways to, show to the public that using their metrics, our public schools are inadequate. And yet the very obvious thing, the thing you learn in like Education 101, your first class in College of Education, is the way in which socioeconomic factors outside of school determine what's really happening inside the school. It's no surprise that the schools that are quote unquote failing also happen to be the ones that are almost entirely poor students, almost entirely racial minorities, higher percentage of English language learners, and on and on. It's very common sense, but it's something that I'd like to see the education community get a little bit more vocal and really partner with groups like Arise to enact some broader tax reform so that we can actually start to address some of these issues before these kids get to school. Because if yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's a real truism that a hungry child can't learn. And given the increased cost of food, because of inflation, it's really, this is the time to do this. This is the equivalent of 2 more weeks of groceries for families. And I agree with you. We wish the education community could support this. We think they will come out ahead. Actually, that income taxes are more stable than sales taxes. I think there is a bit of a, bird in the hand attitude that giving up revenue, expecting it to get replaced is scary. I understand that, but it's still the right thing to do. And you're right, for families, and I think for schools, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think that the irony of the only states that the only states that have grocery taxes are ostensibly anti-tax Republican states. I think that kind of shows who they don't want to tax. It's not that they have a principal opposition to taxation. It's that they have a principal opposition to taxation of their donors and of the people that they represent, which is not working people. And it's so frustrating. And I can't, we've gone a decade with Republican supermajority governance in Alabama, and they have cut lots of taxes, but they have not cut this tax. And we've been okay with this tax being on the poorest people in the state, and the idea that we would even be hesitant to shift that tax onto people who can more readily afford it. If we're going to have the tax at all, then we should have it on the people who can afford it, as opposed to the most poor people in our society. So, Carol, we talked about, before we went off the radio, the American Rescue Plan, and we talked about some of the ideas that the Republican majority was pushing for the expenditure, and some of them were good, some of them you said were not so good. I'd like to wrap our discussion with what Alabama Arise, what is the agenda that Alabama Arise would put forward for the use of the American Rescue Plan dollars?
Yes, I think that's a really great question. And if people will go to our website, which is alarise.org, you can find there our principles on what American Rescue Plan money should be spent on. I actually have a blog coming out early next week that lists some infrastructure proposals that we've got, since we think this money is going to get spent on infrastructure. One of the big ones is on water system improvements all over the state. And we do think that is one of the things the legislature and the governor are proposing. We can get behind that if the water system improvements are targeted to the communities that need them the most.
Right.
And by that, we're really thinking of some of the Alabama Black Belt counties like Lowndes County and Perry, Wilcox, that have terrible water system problems, terrible wastewater system problems, and that need an infusion of investment that the local communities just cannot afford to fix those wastewater issues. We know the legislature is planning on spending a lot of money on water system improvements. We hope they target them to the right places, and we're going to be watching that real closely. We're in general support on broadband. Now, I will say the infrastructure bill has been passed, and that money is coming right behind the ARPA money. There is so much money for broadband in that bill that, I'm a little hesitant about spending a lot of the ARPA money on it, but, but we agree that that's important. Again, particularly for our school children and our schools, which are, many of them are remote right now. We think that there are things we need to do for people who are still struggling that are really kind of human resource issues. We'd love to see bonus pay for low-wage workers who have been working in places like grocery stores and retail and places where they've been exposed to COVID. We very much do want to see investments in the healthcare system. I think I'd said the Department of Public Health really needs some support, and we need to stop the hemorrhaging of our rural hospitals around the state. Of course, Medicaid expansion would solve that problem also. But as I said, we can't spend ARPA money on that. We would like to see some of the new money be spent on something really boring, but that's really needed, which is to improve the technology used by state government. We all know how awful it was when people could not apply for unemployment compensation. They couldn't get through on the telephone. The computer systems were down. The checks weren't coming. We saw those people sitting in the parking lot at Alabama State University in Montgomery, driving for hours so they could get there and sit there overnight in order to apply for unemployment compensation. That just wasn't necessary. And that the solution to that is a really boring solution, which is called good computer systems. So
Right.
we think that
It's
an
boring,
opportunity.
but if you were one of those
You gotta
people,
have-
if you were one of
you
those
gotta
people
have-
trying to call the unemployment office,
I
it
remember
will
that.
it will resonate with you.
Yes.
And yes, and also, you know, anyone who's worked for any government agency, and to some extent even including public schools, you know how poor the computer systems and just technical, you know, it's 2022. It's time for state government to at least have functional computers.
It is, and we'd love to see one-stop shopping for assistance. A whole lot of people got unemployed really quickly last spring. They had never applied for food stamps. They had never applied for unemployment benefits. They'd never applied for health care coverage in their lives, never had to. And then all of a sudden, they were eligible and didn't know how to go about applying for any of the assistance they were eligible for. We'd like to see a one-stop shop where you could simply go to a computer somewhere in Montgomery and apply for everything you are eligible for.
That seems
and
so
be
common
screened for
sense.
Right.
Yeah, it is common sense.
It really is. And,
Yeah.
and, you know, if you're someone who's been laid off, perhaps for the first time in your life, or you are facing, you know, real economic despair, like for the first time ever, and you don't know how to navigate these really complicated bureaucracies and which agency does what, you know, all the different benefits, there's different requirements. So even what meager help we have available for regular people,
Right.
as inadequate as it is often very difficult to actually access.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very difficult. You look at the people who are trying to get rental assistance right now, and how it's just spread all over. Who does it in every city in the state's different.
Right.
And so, you know, we'd like for people to be able to not worry about what agency is providing the service. They can just go apply in one place. And so we're suggesting that the state invest some money in upgrading our technology and getting us, like you said, into the at least the 21st century, if not the 22nd.
Right. And that's so, you know, why would you not do that? You know, the only reason to continue to maintain an outdated, clunky, and difficult to operate system is to keep more people who deserve the aid, who by the metrics of the statutes that appropriate the funds, the only function it serves to have a clunky system is to keep people who are eligible for the funds from the funds. Because if they're not eligible for it, then they won't be able to get it, no matter how quick and easy the system that they apply for it is. That, you know, if people want to say that, oh, there should be less people getting the getting this help, then they should address that through legislation, as opposed to just making it difficult for people who are eligible for the monies to get the funds. So I mean, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah,
but
I've always viewed that as a form of sabotage.
Right.
You know.
Then
where our government does actually do things remotely positive for people, which is unfortunately not enough. It's often, you know, sabotage, whether it's deliberate or not, really doesn't matter to the person on the other end who can't get the help they need.
Yeah. Carol,
or who just don't have the time to. I mean,
right.
It takes a long time. People spend a lot of time on those phones trying to get their unemployment.
And as someone who's like had a toddler running around while trying to be on hold for an hour with state agencies, it's not easy, and not everybody can do that. And I'm someone, you know, I'm a fairly well-educated person who you know, I've dealt with these things on a professional basis. So, you know, if you're someone who you have multiple toddlers running around, or an elder parent that you're taking care of at the same time, it can just be very, very difficult. And like you said, Jacob, either you want people to get the help or you don't.
Right. Yeah, that is the whether you want people to get help or you don't that is an issue to be worked out in the parameters of the legislation, not by making it difficult to access the help once it's been appropriated. And that's like, I don't think that's a crazy position. And these and the people that say that government is slow and it's like not like they're
Maybe
the ones
it's
that
designed to
make
be
it
that
so.
way. So, yes,
right.
maybe
They're the
that's
ones
intentional.
Exactly. They're the ones that make it so. I mean, we're talking about right now, Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, implementing policies that are going to make mail delivery slower, literally make mail delivery slower, and for no and then people are going to talk about, oh, my mail is delivered so slow, blah 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 blah.
Maybe we need to privatize
right,
it, or
exactly.
Maybe we need to use FedEx.
And
more.
it was a conscious decision by these people who hate government to make government more difficult to use. So anyway, Carol, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you going over with us and talking some more to us. Adam, you said that Alabama Arise had a workshop or something that you wanted to make sure that we plugged?
I believe Alabama Rise has a lobby day coming up where they encouraged members and supporters to come down and learn firsthand in Montgomery about these issues and visit with their legislators, and wanted to make sure you had a chance, Carol, to at least share that with our audience and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we do have a lobby day coming up, and I am looking up when it is because I can't remember. It is in February. I can remember that much.
Actually, I do have the flyer, so I can at least help you out on the dates there.
There you go. You can help me with that.
So to participate in person, you need to register online by February 8th. Again, just go to Alabama Rise's website, alarise.org. And you can check that out. And it looks like the lobby day itself is going to be on Tuesday, February 15th. So at least on February 15th, we know there will be some people in Montgomery fighting for working people. Even if it's not there all the time, we know there will be a big crowd of folks to do that. So I don't know if you had anything else to expand on that, Carol, on
It's just a lot. It is a lot of fun. And people don't realize how much fun it is to come to an Arise Lobby Day. You learn a lot, and it's really enjoyable. We're trying to keep it small this year because of COVID. But we're going to have online options, and it's really empowering. It's to talk to your legislator. Most of the people in the legislature are pretty nice men and women, because you have to get elected. And they like talking to their constituents. They just don't know a whole lot about what a lot of their constituents' lives are really like. And so it's a great opportunity to tell your elected officials what you want them to hear from you. So we encourage you to register and to participate. And like I said, we're going to have online options.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate it.
We appreciate it too. You all take care, and I enjoyed this.
Thank you.
All right. So we had one more thing that we wanted to talk about, and it was this clip, and it was just kind of fun. So I wanted to, and so we're still going to talk about it, but it's the this Dave Ramsey clip about how it's not his fault that people are homeless or whatever. And it's so funny because it's so like anti everything that conservatives are supposed to stand for. So we're going to talk about that. And if you want to talk to us, we've got a phone number, 844-899-8857. 844-899-TVLR if you want to jump on the line and hang out with us for a little bit. But we're going to take a break really quick, and we will we'll do that clip, and then we will roll out. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back, okay? Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
Work sucks, we know, but you can make it better by organizing with your fellow workers. For more information, call or text the Huntsville Industrial Workers of the World at 256-651-6707.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBEW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBEW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBEW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
IBEW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBEW is the right choice.
Labor creates all wealth, and all wealth should go to labor. My name is Jacob Morrison, and you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for staying tuned. If you want to give us a call and join the program. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Or you could leave us a voicemail through the week. So if you listen to the show as a podcast and you're like, man, I wish I could call in, I have some things to say to them, then you can. You can call in and you can leave us a voicemail, and we might play it on the radio or not. It's up to us. We have all the power.
Yeah.
But the option is there. The option is available to you if you listen to us as a podcast.
Would definitely be cool. Folks are welcome to do that, and we definitely appreciate the folks who participate in the YouTube chat and Facebook chat.
Right.
It's a lot easier to do this when we know someone's listening.
Absolutely,
and, Also, you guys are great about giving us ideas and questions to ask, and of course, as always, the technical issues that arise from time to time.
Right.
Because we are not radio professionals or media people. It's not what we've went to school for or anything like that. We're just kind of figuring it out on the fly. So appreciate all the folks who are really cool about that and understanding about it. And however you're listening or however you're supporting us, it's definitely appreciated because I think it's just so important that we have a different kind of outlet here in the state and here in the South, aside from mainstream corporate media and press releases from your bosses.
Yeah. And so we appreciate that. And if you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is to become a monthly donor. The largest single source of revenue for our program. The largest single source. We have international unions, we have local unions, we've had state federations, but the largest single source of revenue is our listeners. So if you want to support the show, you can donate on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report or unionly.io/o/TVLR.
And we obviously get that money is tight for a lot of us. There's a lot of good causes out there. Maybe you can't spare any money right now, but your support in other ways really makes a huge difference. So little things like liking the videos on YouTube, sharing this program. I mean, if you have some folks in your life, whether it's real life or strictly on social media, if you know some folks who might would appreciate this, send them to us. Share the link, share the videos. We have some great back catalog interviews. However you can get the word out, it is definitely appreciated.
Yeah. And we've got somebody who apparently just found our Facebook page, and she's been going through a bunch of our posts and calling us Democrats and saying that we hurt her feelings and stuff. So if she wants to call in, she's welcome to 844-899-TVLR. 844. The number is 844-899-8857 if you want to call in.
Well,
and let us know what
interesting.
You think.
I haven't seen those. I stay off the grid a lot these days. I'm not.
Oh no, it was just in the last 15 minutes. She's gone through and commented on half a dozen of our posts. So saying
sorry to hurt feelings.
Sorry to hurt feelings, but you're welcome to tell us all about your hurt feelings if you would like.
And if you think we're just Democrat stooges, then you haven't listened to enough of the show yet.
Right. So so the next thing that we wanted to talk about is Adam, how generally speaking, folks on the left, I consider myself on the left, and we kind of analyze and criticize systems for outcomes. We are
big picture kind of thing.
we look at the big picture. We're less apt to blame the individual, and we look for systemic solutions as opposed to just bootstrappy, you have to do this on your own, or the only way that you can fix it is on your own. So like
we live in a society.
Almost like we live in a society, right? Yeah. So when I see a poor person, my first instinct is not to say oh, it's totally their fault. There's no reason other than their laziness or their, whatever, that like they're poor because of themselves. That's not my first thought. Of course, like people are individuals and people have agency, and there's, there's always some mix, but like I can't fix a person's like their ideas. But we have statistics and we have data, and we can say like, oh, wow. So when you do this, like when you implement a policy that like gives people health care, for instance, people are more successful. Or when you implement a policy that gives people retirement pensions as a public policy that decreases poverty among the elderly population, and we don't have people like dying in the street of old age. So these are good things, I think, and those are systemic solutions to systemic problems. And of course, we can always talk about, like, if I'm talking to an individual, like a family member, like I'm going to talk to them about ways that they can individually make their life better. But if I'm talking on a systemic level for looking for ways to make society better, I'm going to look for societal solutions, generally.
And, I don't think it's that crazy to want to live in a better world and a better society, better community, better state, better country. I mean, that seems, I don't know, it just seems natural for me that, hey, I want everyone to be a little bit better off tomorrow than they were today. I don't see that as a very radical idea, but apparently it is to, desire that your community actually get better.
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of generally speaking how we see the world. And on the flip side, generally speaking, conservative, like anti-collectivist, pro-individualist people, they're like the opposite of that, right? They say that, oh, nothing is ever, if you ever look at systems in society, you're totally negating your own ability to make the world better or your life better, or well, like it's all about you. It's all about you. You there's not a society, there's no such thing as society. You're an individual and you choose how your life end up. It's all about you. It's all about you. So that's generally kind of how things go. So that is like not exactly what Dave Ramsey says here. So let's go ahead and listen to what he says.
Okay, I own rental property, single-family homes, among many other properties that we own. And if I raise my rent to be market rate, that does not make me a bad Christian. I did not displace the person out of that house if they can no longer afford it. The marketplace did. The economy did. The ratio of the income that they earned to their housing expense displaced them. I didn't cause any of that. And so you are not displacing them. You're taking too much credit for what's going on. If they need to move to a cheaper house because they can't afford, they're going to move to a lesser house. Because if they move, they're going to pay market rent.
So he says there, and that's all that I wanted to see the clip. He said, it's like he doesn't even say he doesn't even say, oh, my expenses increased, so I had to increase the rent. Oh, it costs more to hire labor to get people to fix problems at my rental property. He just says this amorphous, invisible market, a house next door to me sold for higher, so now I have to increase rent. Even though my expenses have not gone up at all, it's just like a house 10 yards away from me happened to sell for a high price, and so now all of a sudden I get to charge my tenants higher, more money. For I haven't done anything. I haven't worked any harder. I haven't paid any more. I just literally, I get to suck more money from my tenants because the house next door to me sold for more money. I mean, can you imagine, and like on a certain level, what he's saying is like, there's some truth to it, as in, if he were not the landlord, there would be another landlord that would be doing the same thing because of these market forces and because you can charge higher rent. Somebody would, many people, most landlords would in the situation that he is in, but he's not explaining why he doesn't have to make that decision. He can choose to not raise rent when his expenses don't go up. He can choose as an individual, as a Christian, to not raise rent when his expenses do not go up, and to not suck the blood out of his tenants literally just because he can. Literally just because he can. And he's totally absolving himself of his personal responsibility. He's totally absolving himself of his personal responsibility and blaming everything he does on society and on this amorphous system that we live in, and saying it's okay for me as an individual to act this way because other people are acting this way. Because other people are acting this way, it is fine for me to take more money from people that are poorer than me, and even though it's not costing me any more money, I'm not putting in any more effort, I'm not working any harder, I'm just taking more. I'm just taking more, and that's okay because of society, because of the system.
That's the system we have, right? And it is really convenient how that kind of flips on and off depending on context, and in a way that can try to absolve you of any guilt you may feel.
Right.
And because I like the way you set this up before the clip. I consider myself to be, a materialist, and I am someone who does look at things from that systemic angle. But, of course, we all have our individual choices and consequences from those choices, our own personal responsibility. That conservatives love to harp on that phrase, but I don't know anyone who just believes there's no such thing as personal responsibility, no matter how deep you go down like a Marxist, historical, materialist kind of viewpoint. And I think that we can acknowledge multiple true things. It is true that is the system we have, and you're right, that probably another landlord could have fulfilled that role. In the big picture, we're all, cogs in a machine. But we are also all human beings who are living among other human beings, and we all make our own choices in how we operate in this machine. So, you can't have it both ways, and if personal responsibility is real, don't you have some responsibility to try to live the most ethical life you can in the system that we have, while at the same time seeking to change that system to be a better one for human beings and our values.
Right. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, so, we can, and we've been calling back to the first thing that we talked about today, like, a lot, so we can say that, maybe there are systemic reasons that police officers are, that it's not even their individual responsibility, quote unquote, that there is a disproportionate amount of police violence, but it is on an individual to not murder. Like, even though there are systemic forces pushing you towards that, it's still ultimately your decision to pull the trigger.
Absolutely.
And for anybody else who commits murder, there are, and even more so for poor people, for poor people who commit murder than for cops, there are systemic forces that push you into gangs that and that do all these things, and that make you more likely to commit crime.
Right.
But of course, that doesn't absolve you of making the choice. We can talk about, okay, there are systemic solutions to these things, and we can make crime go down through attacking systemic solutions, but that doesn't absolve the person who pulled the trigger of pulling the trigger. They have to be held to account, and we can fix things moving forward to make it so that other people are not pushed to that same decision But of course, it's still their ultimate responsibility and their agency to pull the trigger. And it is exactly that same problem. Dave Ramsey, it is his ultimate individual agency, his individual choice, and his personal responsibility to be a fair and just landlord, as if such a thing, can exist, and it's not illegitimate in its own right to be a landlord.
I think it's a very important distinction, though, because you're right, and I agree with the example of the police, because as critical as I am of the police, I recognize that there are people who join the police department with the best of intentions. Maybe their heart was moved to do this because of some experience growing up, or maybe they just really believe, hey, this is the way I can protect and serve my community. I have a dangerous neighborhood I grew up in. I want to make it safer.
Right.
I want to save a cat from a tree. Whatever may motivate them to pursue that. I recognize there are probably people like that. They're not, I'm sure just as there are plenty who are flat out reactionary bigots who join for the pure reasons of getting that kind of power and ability to inflict violence without repercussion. Right? We can acknowledge that both people exist. But as you said, so if you are that good-hearted person, you're a reform-minded person, you join the police department because you're going to change things from the inside and make it better, there will come a time in your life, probably not too far into your career, where you're on the precipice and you must decide, do I bow to the pressures of the system or do I, and abandon my values, or do I stay true to my values of trying to make things better and be good? That contradiction will arise, and so I think at the end of the day, if you bow to that system and as a result someone is murdered, someone is injured, someone is falsely accused or falsely incarcerated, that's on you. Whatever was in your heart and whatever systemic pressures you felt there, from the top down, that does not absolve you of the harm done. And I know that's probably a really rambling, long way of reiterating that, but it does resonate with me. I mean, and I'm sure I'm not the only person involved with this program or listening to this program who has tried entering things to make it better, right? How many of us have tried participating in electoral politics to try to change things, or working inside institutions to try to change things? You're probably going to run your head into a wall, and you do reach those moments of contradiction between your rationale for being there, your values you hold, and the pressures of the system or institution you're in. So the Dave Ramsey types, they love to pick and choose, and conveniently, it seems to be relevant when they can absolve themselves of their own guilt and actions. But not
he even
others.
in the same clip, he even says like, "Oh, it's not my fault that they're homeless; it's their fault that they're homeless." He even says something about
you
how,
don't know that.
like, he says something about how like that it's the ratio of their income to the rent that made them homeless,
as if
and
it's all this like mystical thing of which humans have no part in. Yeah, it really is both ways, where we mystify all this. The economy is not this thing that came from God, that came from on high, that we have no control over, and that is sort of the neoliberal standpoint, right, that we've lived under for the last 40 years or so, that basically there is no alternative. This is just the way it is, the market overall.
Right.
So so it's like a mystification of what's really happening with the political economy and people's real material lives and the decisions and policies that are made that affect that. But then, if you're on the losing side of that, well, it must just all be your individual choices.
Right. And Jeb in the chat said that basically asked, does his point show that the spate of smash and grabs, the looting and all this stuff that has been shown on right-wing media, does that mean that they're actually justified due to inflation and the free market adjustments making items unaffordable? And of course Ramsey wouldn't think that, because that's because poor people stealing deodorant is much worse for society than me as a rich person making a poor person homeless. Like, of course,
Right.
obviously, even though normal people, like working people, would say that a person being homeless is a worse outcome than Walgreens having one less stick of deodorant.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of it boils down to that. How do you feel about your fellow human beings?
Right.
And again, going back to the living in a society, I know it's kind of a meme joke at this point and everything, but we do live in a society.
Yeah.
And it is hard to get people to believe in empathy. Certainly when you have folks like a Dave Ramsey who have such a massive audience, and there's so much money spent trying to convince us that, no, we don't live in the society, and it is all about you, and it really doesn't matter what happens to your neighbors.
Right.
If they're homeless, to hell with them, right? As long as you can still afford this nice subscription for $19.99 a month plus tax and fees.
Yep. All right, folks. Well, that's all we had for you. Thank you for listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. This has been the Valley Labor Report, and we will see you next week.
Bye, y'all.